The Crown of the Harvesters. We get an absolutely tiny summary of the Venthir campaign in Chronicle, so I'm not going to capture any footage for it, because that would be a lot of extra work for no reason. But, after the raid, the Venthir Covenant and any champion that joined them managed to win over and/or conquer all but one of the remaining Harvesters of the realm, thanks to a bunch of supportive deeds and heroism and stuff. It was then revealed that the super awesome medallions that the Harvesters held could be forged into something called the Crown of the Harvesters. However, one slight problem: even imprisoned, Denathrius would still be able to inflict his will on that crown, warping its power to his own ends. The only way to both forge the crown and break Denathrius' hold on it was for us to travel to the Citadel of Loyalty in Bastion and get Mechanicos the Forgelight Prime to craft and purify the thing. So we did that. The end. Rise of the House of the Chosen. Mortals pledged to the Necrolord Covenant returned to Maldraxxus to find the seat of the Primus under attack again, from the houses of Constructs and Rituals, with Draka ordering the champion to assist Baroness Vash in rallying those who remained of the House of Eyes. During that, we managed to steal an entire necropolis, Xericris, which significantly boosted the House of the Chosen's power and forces. After that, the champions assisted Alexandros Mograine with a bunch of things. Firstly, the recently rescued Baron was troubled by the Construct's attack on Bastion and wanted to find ways to help the Kyrian. So we did that, helping the Paragon of Courage Xandria root out Margrave Garmel's forces from her temple. During which, Mograine found himself wondering why the bloody hell his soul had been sent to Maldraxxus in the first place. Being a paladin in life, it would have made more sense for him to be sent to Bastion, right? Xandria tried to assure the self-doubting Baron that the Arbiter had sent him to the place he would best serve death, but that wasn't an acceptable, satisfying answer. Mograine struggled with his thoughts still. So, Xandria then offered him the wealth of Bastion's knowledge to find the answers he sought. As Alexandros read stuff, he realised that it was his memories of life that were the source of his courage. Memories he would have had to cleanse had he become an Ascended in Bastion, thereby losing the very source of his own strength. And with that new insight, Alexandros found his resolve, and all was right in the world. After assisting the Kyrian with their problems though, they were more than happy to assist the Necrolords with theirs. So, we head back to Maldraxxus, and finally brought down the House of Constructs once and for all, raiding the Margrave stronghold and discovering a store of anima from Revendreth in the process. After that, we head to Revendreth, and came upon Kel'Thas Sunstrider, who was now on a little journey of his own to reduce the massive weight of his Sin Stone. Joining up with him, we managed to sever the ties between Denathrius' remaining loyalists and the more aligned Maldraxxi, but we also uncovered a terrifying revelation. Kel'Thuzad was in league with the Jailer. What a surprise. Disguising ourselves, we then infiltrated Kel'Thuzad's inner circle, discovering the Lich intended to bring the full might of Namor into Maldraxxus, and that he'd been holding the House of Rituals Margrave prisoner, siphoning his power and controlling the house for quite a while. So we took Kel'Thuzad's ass and freed Margrave Sindane, bringing the House of Rituals back to our side in the process, and then everything was great. Next, Torghast, Tower of the Damned. During the various Covenant campaigns, the champion learned the location of Bane Bloodhoof, and with the assistance of Venari, we rescued the bloke, so that he could sit in Oribos for the rest of the expansion. Amid that rescue, we took the ass of the Warden holding Bane, and they dropped a curious key. Apparently we then just fumbled our way around different doorways in Torghast for a bit, until finding the correct one, and upon unlocking it with the key, we discovered another prisoner of the Jailer, a very large bloke who had lost most of his memories. However, if we found his stolen memories, he'd probably be able to help us or something. So we did that. We buggered off, found one of these lost memories and returned to the mysterious prisoner with it, learning that this person would like to be referred to as the Runecarver moving forward, and he could in fact use magic to strengthen our weapons and armour. Also, we freed one of his hands, so he could masturbate or something. After that, Bolvar tasked us with locating the rest of the missing Horde and Alliance leaders within the Maw. So we did, finding clues which led us to Jaina Proudmoore first, and Thrall soon after. Stumbling upon the Jailer and Sylvanas having another Brain Trust meeting at one point as well. Overhearing them discuss Anduin. The Banshee Queen was attempting to convince the Eternal One that Anduin would be more powerful if he joined them willingly, rather than being forced to do it. And the Jailer agreed to allow Sylvanas a chance to persuade the young king. Returning to Oribos, Bolvar was deeply disturbed by that news regarding Anduin, using the Helm of Domination once again to peek into the Maw in an effort to find the king, at which point we observed Sylvanas' attempt to sway Anduin to her cause. promising that Mr. Jailer simply wished to remake the Machine of Death and the Afterlives into a more just system. He just wanted to make things fairer. Anduin said piss off, so Sylvanas moved to depart, but not without having the final word. Anduin had a choice to make: join her and the Jailer willingly, or be made to do it. Apparently that was enough peering for this moment, so champions went off and did other things for a while. But the next time we peered into the maw, we saw yet another cutscene. A new Mournblade, a sword of domination, was being crafted. A blade that looked very much like Anduin's weapon Charlemagne, but covered in runes. The vision then changed, with Sylvanas arriving back at Anduin's prison, again reiterating her ultimatum that Anduin should choose. And Anduin finally realised why Sylvanas seemed so bloody obsessed with this idea. Because she was never given a choice of whether to accept domination. Arthas cruelly thrust that fate upon her. For a brief moment, Anduin saw morality in Sylvanas, uncertainty, and the audible groan of lots of players rang out as everyone realised that they were going to cruelly thrust a redemption arc on us, whether we wanted one or not. But the Jailer then finally noticed Bolvar's constant spying. Chains shot out from the helm of domination, with Bolvar battling the Jailer for control over his own mind. And we just went ahead and anchored Bolvar with our words, so crisis averted. Everything was fine immediately. Battle of Ardenweald. At this point, the Jailer moved on to the next phase of his plans, securing the 5 magic sigils he needed to open up the sepulchre of the first ones. Athreus had already given up his sigil willingly, at some point. None in Maldraxxus knew yet what had become of the Primus and his sigil. We'll get to that in a bit. But the Winter Queen, Arbiter and Archon sigils still remained safe and sound for the next few paragraphs. Unfortunately, a newly broken Anduin proved to be just the weapon the Jailer needed to retrieve the things. See, the young king's inherent compassion and great heart managed to conceal the Jailer's domination of his mind, long enough for him to waltz right up to the Archon in Bastion. Although the Archon herself did manage to see through the ruse eventually, 'twas too late. The glamour around Anduin dissolved, revealing his Morsworn armour, and he leapt forth, plunging Kingsmorn into the Archon's chest, drawing forth her sigil. We did, however, get the briefest glimpse of Anduin's horror at what he'd just done, but he then quickly fell back under the domination magic's sway and buggered off. We then decided it was probably a good idea to head to Ardenweald post-haste, put all of our efforts into defending the Winter Queen's sigil, and Jaina Proudmoore, who was now sufficiently recovered from her time in the Maw, joined us for that. However, as we arrived in Ardenweald, we found it already under attack, with the Morsworn forces being led by none other than Sylvanas Windrunner. In an effort to confuse the enemy, many Night Fae disguised themselves as the Winter Queen, but Sylvanas saw right through that decoy thing pretty quickly, opening a portal to the Maw and bringing a charred behemoth into the realm of Ardenweald. But she was a little bit surprised to see the beast instantly topple to the ground, dead, with Tyrande Whisperwind standing atop it, ready to avenge her people. Sylvanas and Tyrande were evenly matched in their fight, with Tyrande taunting her enemy, telling Sylvanas that she had killed Nathanos Blightcaller before the expansion had even come out. Barely broken a sweat, taking the Banshee Queen's champion's head. And that news caught Sylvanas a little bit off guard. They were in the realms of death right now, so where the bloody hell was he? Tyrande spotted that lapse and hesitation, so the Jailer had not informed Sylvanas that her boyfriend was here. How interesting. But the Wild Hunt's horn then interrupted the fight, signalling that the enemy had broken their line elsewhere. This had in fact been a distraction. Sylvanas then shifted to her Banshee form and attempted to cheese it, but Tyrande wasn't going to let her escape. She allowed the full power of the Night Warrior to flow through her, knowing it would likely kill her in the process. The two then collided mid-air, crashing to the ground, and for a moment it looked like Tyrande had won. But she hadn't. Azira arrived, just in time to see Sylvanas cheese it, and Tyrande collapsed to the floor with the power of the Night Warrior now consuming her, body and soul. So, Azira sent the High Priestess gently to sleep, before the rage of the Avatar could take her. Meanwhile, the champion arrived at the heart of the forest, alongside Jaina and Bolvar, just in time to see Anduin bugger off with the Winter Queen's sigil. So big ol' waste of everyone's time. Next, a couple of side sections, starting with the Eye of the Jailer. Whilst assisting Venari with stuff in the Maw, the champion encountered Danica, the Reclaimer, one of Odin's Valkyr, stuck in a cage. She warned us that many of her sisters had been lost to Helya's vile rituals, and asked that we help her escape that fate herself. So we did. Kind of. We witnessed Helya using one of Odin's Valkyr to empower Sylvanas' 9, and the ruler of Helheim then gave us a message for Odin, allowing us to leave with Danica in order to pass that message on. Returning to Skyhold, Odin was ever so slightly pissed off by the message from Helya, with the Titan Keeper then confessing that the Valkyr were not the only thing that had been stolen from him. The jailer also had his eye. See, a long time ago, Odin had traded it with Mutzala for a glimpse beyond the Veil of Death. Mutzala then tethered that eye to the Maw, which in turn allowed the jailer to observe the entire realm, able to see almost all of the things, almost all of the times. Odin then dispatched us, Danica, a bunch of chosen Valkyr and a magical horn back to the Maw, on a mission to destroy Odin's eye and exact revenge on Helya. So we tried to do that. We bound the magical horn to the Maw, summoned the Wrath of Odin, managed to blind Odin's eye, but it cheesed it back to the jailer before we could strike the final blow. We will get another chance to vanquish the eye completely, but for now, at least we had blinded it. The next little side section, Tazavesh, the Veiled Market. In Oribos, the champion was approached by a broker named Al-Dalil, and he informed us that the leader of a competing cartel, Solia, was playing sillybuggers, obtaining ancient relics crafted by the first ones. So, we looked into that, discovering that Solia was in a place called Tazavesh. Unfortunately, Al-Dalil had kinda lost track of where exactly Tazavesh was. Like many broker cities, Tazavesh resided in a dimension called the In-Between, a dimension where places often shifted position and moved around. So we went all over the damned place for a bit, until eventually we found Tazavesh, and did the mega dungeon. Encountering malfunctioning mechanical constructs, irate custom officials, bounty hunters, assassins, pirate dragons, murlocs, anything you can think of, really. Lesbian ham. At the end of the dungeon, we found Solia, too late to stop her from activating an artifact and transforming into a more powerful thing, with rampant energy spilling from the artifact and threatening to tear down the entire city. So we took her ass, and all was right in the world. The Primus. Now the In-Between hid more than just a broker city mega dungeon. It also hid a place vital to the jailer's plans. Korthia, the City of Secrets. A realm that safeguarded powerful knowledge and artifacts. Unbeknownst to everyone, the Primus had known of this place, and actually concealed his sigil here prior to his confrontation with the jailer. He believed that Korthia was sufficiently protected and hidden, safe from the jailer's grasp. This pissed the jailer off quite a bit. Unable to obtain the Primus' sigil, he took everything else from his fellow Eternal One instead, including his memories. And then, using the very power of domination the Primus had created, he forced the ruler of Maldraxxus into his service as the Runecarver. What a twist! Since his imprisonment, the Runecarver had designed many things for the jailer. Frostmourne, the Helm of Domination, other things. But now, due to many more years of accumulating power and anima and stuff, the jailer was finally able to locate Korthia, and wielding his Chains of Domination, he was able to literally pull it from the In-Between into the Maw. Talanara dispatched us, the Maw Walker, into the new zone, and after a few introductory things, we activated another waystone, allowing the armies of death to arrive. And from this new staging area, those armies and the Covenants could make their way from Korthia to the Maw and attack the jailer's forces. So we had more invasions and a new zone to boot. Great. Anyway, champions made their way to the vaults of Korthia, locating the Primus' sigil, recovering it with Bolvar's assistance before the Mawsworn did. However, it was encased in a strange magic, which resembled the Runecarver's work. So we head to Torghast to ask that bloke some questions. Keep in mind, we didn't know he was the Primus yet. This was when we found out, because showing the sigil to the Runecarver caused his remaining memories to return to him. All was not right in the world though, because we'd just done one of the dumbest things we've ever been forced to do in this game to advance the plot. We had taken an ever so important sigil directly into the jailer's seat of power. Unsurprisingly, the jailer arrived, with his champion Anduin alongside him, and although we did put up a good fight, Anduin was able to retrieve the sigil, and we were forced to cheese it. Only one sigil now remained, the one held by the Arbiter that had actually been the jailer's originally. The Primus did inform us that it wasn't quite as bad as it seemed. He did have the power to create new sigils once the Covenants could realign with their purposes, but it was very important that we stop the jailer from getting this last sigil. Very, very important. So important that the next section is about something else entirely. Battle of the Maw. Now that the Primus had been restored and liberated and stuff, a plan was hatched to take out two crucial allies of the jailer within the Maw, Baron Vyraz and Helya, both occupying their fortresses of Desmond-Tayron. Draka led the assault, so Thrall requested to join as well. During this battle, Thrall spoke with his mother, refraining from telling her who he really was. Since coming to the Shadowlands, he'd heard that some souls did not retain their memories from life, so he chose to again not reveal his identity, just as he had in alternate Draenor. Best not to distract from this battle, anyway. However, Draka didn't give a crap about any of that. She addressed Thrall by his birth name, Goel, revealing that she'd known who he was the moment she first saw him. He had his father's eyes, so that was nice. Anyway, we all soon tracked down both Vyraz and Helya, with us felling the traitorous Baron, whilst the Primus banished Helya from the Maw entirely. She could no longer provide the jailer with any assistance, and that's pretty much everything for this section. As a reward for her heroic deeds, the Primus officially proclaimed Draka the Margrave of the House of the Chosen. The end. Sanctum of Domination. The next raid of the expansion, and the last thing I'll talk about in this video, but good news, there will probably only be one more episode after this, and then Chronicle Volume 4 is completed, and the series is finished, and the supercut will be whenever. Despite its massive importance to the Shadowlands, Oribos was only a little realm, and poorly defended. When the Mawsworn inevitably attacked, the defenders of the Pantheon of Death had very little chance of protecting the Arbiter. So, Bolvar directed yet another assault into the Maw, sending us, Thrall and Jaina into Torghast in a desperate bid to blunt the jailer's forces. There, we fought against a whole bunch of the jailer's twisted weapons of torture, including the corrupted Eye of Odin, which we had earlier blinded. We also encountered those who remained of the Nine, the Valkyr who would help Sylvanas forge her pact with the jailer. We found the imprisoned soul of Garrosh Hellscream, who very conveniently broke his chains just as we arrived, charging his torturer and exploding or something. Honourable mentions also go to Kel'Thuzad, a corrupted Fate Scribe, a twisted remnant of Nazul, Lesbian Ham, and a malfunctioning automaton, the guardian of the First Ones, as well. Finally, at the apex of the tower, we faced Sylvanas Windrunner. The deaths of her Nine filled the champion with confidence that this would be somewhat easy, but, to be honest, her power had hardly been dampened at all, with her unleashing her full might upon us, which, in and of itself, was nothing but a ruse, a distraction in order to waylay us whilst the jailer made his way to Oribos. However, as we neared the end of the raid battle, Sylvanas shifted yet again to her Banshee form, choosing it to rejoin with the jailer, and we gave chase, witnessing the jailer himself appear and use his Chains of Domination to lock the Tower of Torghast to Oribos. We continued our fight at the very feet of the Arbiter, but we were exhausted by this point. The jailer reached out his hand, with his old sigil floating forward and settling inside his chest, returning to its rightful place. Also, the fake Arbiter vanished, but who cares? She had no personality whatsoever. Big old Nipple Boy then didn't waste any more time. He used the power of all 5 sigils to open the way to Zereth Mortis, where lay the sepulchre of the First Ones, turning to all of the leaders of Azeroth and forcing them to kneel before him, wrapping them in domination chains and telling them to prepare for a new world, one where he would be ruler of all creation, one where all would serve him. And Sylvanas finally realised that the jailer had been full of shit this entire time. These were not the words of one who wished to restore fairness, and justice, and free will. These were the words of a tyrant. Words not that dissimilar to Arthas, her tormentor. Anduin had been right. She was nothing more than a tool to the bloke. So she went ahead and fired an arrow at him, declaring that she would never serve. 'Twas a futile gesture of defiance. The jailer genuinely did not care. In fact, he was so unthreatened by this, he just went ahead and rewarded her previous service with a gift, the piece of her soul that Frostmourne had taken from her. See, just like Uther, Sylvanas had been missing a part of herself, a piece that the jailer had kept hidden. The shock of her soul's reunion was so powerful that Sylvanas actually dropped to her knees and passed out, with her eyes rolling almost as far back as mine did. And then the jailer buggered off,